The explosion shook the ground beneath Jake Morrison's boots as he ran through the burning ruins of the Zetharian outpost. Smoke filled the air, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. His rifle hung across his chest while his medical pack bounced against his back with each step. Around him, the sounds of battle echoed through the destroyed buildings. Jake was a combat medic with the human forces, stationed on the frontier world of Kepler 442b. For 3 years, humanity had been at war with the Zetharian Empire. The aliens were fierce warriors, and both sides had lost thousands of soldiers. Jake had seen more death in these 3 years than he ever imagined possible. He had held dying friends in his arms and watched good people take their last breaths on foreign soil. The mission today was simple. Captain Lewis Grant had ordered them to clear the outpost and move forward. The Zetharians were retreating, pulling back to a stronger defensive position. Jake's unit was supposed to sweep through and make sure no enemies remained behind. It was dangerous work, but necessary. Jake moved carefully through a collapsed doorway, his weapon ready. The room beyond was dark except for the light filtering through cracks in the ceiling. He could hear his own breathing inside his helmet, loud and steady. His heart pounded in his chest as he scanned for threats. That was when he heard it. A small sound, almost like a whimper. Jake froze, listening carefully. There it was again. It was coming from deeper in the building, from what looked like a reinforced chamber in the back. Every instinct told him to call it in and move on. It could be a trap. The Zetharians were known for setting ambushes, but something made him move forward anyway. Jake approached the chamber slowly, his rifle raised. The door had been blown partially open, hanging at an odd angle. He could see movement inside through the gap. Small movement. Jake kicked the door fully open and stepped inside, ready for anything. What he found stopped him in his tracks. 3 small Zetharian younglings huddled together in the corner of the room. They were children, no bigger than human toddlers, though their scaled skin and multiple eyes marked them as clearly alien. One of them was bleeding from a wound on its side. Another had burns across its small body. The third was trembling, making small clicking sounds of distress. Jake stared at them, his mind racing. These were Zetharian children, the enemy's children. His people had been taught to hate the Zetharians, to see them as monsters who wanted to destroy humanity. But looking at these small, injured creatures, all Jake could see were scared kids who needed help. His radio crackled to life. "Morrison, what's your position?" "We're moving out in 5 minutes." Jake looked at the younglings, then at his medical supplies. He knew what he was supposed to do. Leave them. They were the enemy, but his hands were already moving, pulling out bandages and medical gel from his pack. "Morrison, respond," the voice came again. Jake turned off his radio. His hands shook slightly as he approached the younglings. They pressed back against the wall, terrified of him. He moved slowly, speaking in a soft voice even though they couldn't understand his words. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. Let me help." The wounded one was losing blood fast. Jake worked quickly, applying pressure to the wound and using his medical gel to seal it. The substance worked on most carbon-based life forms, and he hoped it would help the alien child. The youngling made small sounds of pain but didn't try to fight him. Next, he treated the burns on the second child. His medical training kicked in, overriding everything else. These were patients who needed care. Nothing else mattered in that moment. He used burn patches and pain medication, adjusting the doses as best he could for their smaller size and different biology. The third youngling watched him with wide eyes. It was uninjured but clearly in shock. Jake gave it a small thermal blanket from his pack, wrapping it around the small body. Time passed quickly. Jake lost track of how long he had been there. He set up a makeshift shelter in the corner, using debris to create a protected space. He left water and some emergency rations, though he wasn't sure if they could eat human food. Then he pulled out his emergency transmitter and did something he never thought he would do. He broadcast a distress signal on Zetharian military frequencies. The message was simple, just coordinates and a medical emergency code he had learned from intercepted communications. He hoped the enemy would come for their young before it was too late. Jake sat back and looked at his work. The younglings were stable now, at least for the moment. They had a chance. He had given them a chance. That was when he heard boots approaching. Multiple sets of boots. Jake stood up slowly as Captain Grant entered the chamber with 3 other soldiers. They stared at the scene in front of them with expressions of shock and anger. "What the hell did you do, Morrison?" Captain Grant's voice was cold and hard. Jake met his commander's eyes. They were dying, sir. They're just children. They're the enemy, Grant said. And you just gave away our position with that transmission. Did you think we wouldn't detect it? Jake said nothing. There was nothing to say. He had known the risks when he made his choice. Grant shook his head. Jake Morrison, you are under arrest for disobeying direct orders and giving aid to enemy combatants. Corporal Hayes, take his weapon and restrain him. Jake didn't resist as they stripped him of his rifle and secured his hands behind his back. He took one last look at the younglings as he was led away. The smallest one watched him go with those large alien eyes. Jake hoped they would survive. He hoped someone would come for them. The trip back to the human base was silent. Jake rode in the transport vehicle with guards on either side of him. None of his fellow soldiers would meet his eyes. Some looked at him with disgust. Others just looked confused. Jake understood. He had broken the most important rule of war. He had helped the enemy. At the base, they put him in a holding cell. The room was small and gray with a simple bed and a toilet. A force field hummed across the doorway instead of bars. Jake sat on the bed and put his head in his hands. What had he done? His career was over. His life as he knew it was finished. He would face a military tribunal and the charges were serious. Treason. Aiding the enemy during wartime. He could be executed. But when Jake closed his eyes, he saw those 3 small younglings huddled together, scared and hurt. He saw the wound he had sealed, the burns he had treated. He had saved their lives. How could that be wrong? Days passed in the cell. Jake was allowed no visitors except for his assigned military lawyer, a tired woman named Amy Collins who looked at him with a mixture of pity and frustration. Why did you do it, Jake? She asked during their first meeting. Everyone is asking why. You had a good record. You saved dozens of human lives during this war. You were up for a commendation. Why throw it all away for alien kids? Jake thought about her question for a long time before answering. Because they needed help and I could help them. It's that simple, Amy. I'm a medic. I took an oath to preserve life. Those younglings were dying right in front of me. How could I just walk away? Amy sighed and made notes on her tablet. The prosecution is going to argue that you endangered your entire unit. That transmission could have brought enemy forces down on your position. You're lucky no one was killed. I know, Jake said quietly. I know I messed up, but I'd do it again. Amy looked up at him sharply. Don't say that at the tribunal. Please, Jake. They're looking for any reason to make an example of you. There are people who think we're being too soft in this war. If you show remorse, maybe we can argue for life imprisonment instead of execution. Jake nodded, but he knew he couldn't lie. He had made his choice on that battlefield, and he stood by it. Whatever happened next was just the consequence he had to face. In his cell at night, Jake wondered about the younglings. Had someone found them? Were they alive? He would probably never know. The Zetharians wouldn't announce that they had recovered their young from a human battlefield. And even if they had survived, Jake would never see them again. He was wrong about that last part, but he wouldn't know that for several more weeks, when everything in his life would change forever in ways he could never have imagined. The choice he made in that ruined outpost had set in motion events that would reshape the war and his destiny. But for now, Jake Morrison sat alone in his cell and waited for judgment. Queen Sareth Velkara stood in the medical bay of her royal palace, looking down at the small form sleeping in the recovery pod. Her daughter, Princess Lyra, breathed peacefully under the soft glow of the healing lights. The wounds on her small body were closing, the burns fading. She would live. Against all odds, she would survive. Sareth's hand trembled as she reached out to touch the transparent surface of the pod. For 3 days, she had believed her daughter was dead. When the outpost fell to human forces, all reports indicated that everyone inside had been killed. The military had written off the position as lost, including the small group of younglings who had been sheltering there during the attack. Sareth had barely been able to function during those dark days. She was a queen and a warrior, trained to hide emotion and project strength. But losing Lyra had broken something inside her. Her daughter was only 4 cycles old, barely more than a hatchling. The thought of her dying alone and afraid in that ruined building had haunted Sareth's every moment. Then yesterday, a rescue team responding to a distress signal had found them. 3 younglings alive in a makeshift shelter, treated with medical supplies and protected from the elements. 2 of them were children of her royal guards. The third was Lyra. The medical team had been stunned. The younglings should have died from their wounds within an hour. Instead, someone had stabilized them with expert care. Someone had given them a chance to survive until help arrived. The question was who? Sareth turned to Commander Vex, her head of security, who stood waiting near the door. "Tell me again what the younglings said." Vex approached, holding a data tablet. His scales were a darker green than hers, marked with scars from many battles. "Princess Lyra was the most coherent, my queen. She says a human soldier found them after the fighting had passed. She expected him to kill them. Instead, he helped them." "A human," Sareth said slowly. The word tasted strange in her mouth. Humans were the enemy. They had invaded Zetharian territory, destroyed their colonies, killed thousands of her people. Humans were supposed to be barbaric creatures without honor or mercy, yet one of them had saved her daughter's life. "There is more," Vex continued. "We recovered security footage from the outpost's damaged systems. The recordings are partial, but they show what happened." Sareth watched as Vex activated a holographic display. The image was grainy and flickered with static, but she could see the interior of the shelter chamber. A human soldier entered the room, weapon raised. The younglings cowered in the corner. Sareth's chest tightened as she watched her daughter press against the wall in terror. But the human didn't fire. Instead, he lowered his weapon and approached slowly. His movements were careful and non-threatening. Then he knelt down and began treating their wounds. Sareth watched in silence as the human worked with practiced efficiency, using his medical supplies to save 3 enemy children. The footage showed him setting up the shelter, leaving supplies, and then doing something that made Vex freeze the image. The human was broadcasting a signal on Zetharian frequencies. "He called for help," Sareth said quietly. "He risked his own position to make sure we would find them." "Yes, my queen," Vex confirmed. "And according to our intelligence reports, he was arrested by his own forces immediately after. The humans intercepted his transmission as well." Sareth stared at the frozen image of the human soldier. She could not see his face clearly through the helmet, but his body language spoke of care and determination. This was not the action of a monster. This was something else entirely. "I want to know everything about this human," Sareth commanded. "His name, his history, his current location, everything." Over the next week, Sareth became obsessed with learning about the human who had saved her daughter. She used every intelligence resource at her disposal. Captured human prisoners were questioned. Intercepted communications were analyzed. Slowly, a picture emerged. His name was Jake Morrison. He was 28 years old by human reckoning. He had been a combat medic for 3 years, serving with distinction. His record showed numerous commendations for bravery and life-saving actions. He had saved more than 40 human soldiers during his service. Now he sat in a human military prison, awaiting trial for treason. The charge was aiding enemy combatants during wartime. The penalty could be death. Sareth read the reports again and again. This human had thrown away his entire life to save her daughter. He had known the consequences and done it anyway. In Zetharian culture, such an action created a life debt, one of the most sacred bonds in their society. When someone saved a life, especially the life of someone you loved, you were bound to honor that debt no matter the cost. But this was different. The life debt was owed to an enemy, to a human. Sareth's advisors would say it was impossible to honor such a debt. Her military commanders would call it weakness. Some would say the debt didn't count because humans had no honor and could not understand such concepts. Sareth knew they were wrong. She had seen the footage. She had heard her daughter describe the gentle way the human had treated her wounds. Jake Morrison had honor, whether his people recognized it or not. And Sareth would honor the debt owed to him. She called a private council meeting in her war room. Only her most trusted advisors attended: Commander Vex, High Chancellor Dren, and military advisor Keth. They gathered around the strategy table, confusion clear on their faces. "I have asked you here to discuss a matter of life debt," Sareth began. She brought up the footage of Jake Morrison helping the younglings. "This human saved my daughter's life and the lives of 2 other younglings. According to our laws and traditions, a life debt is owed." The room fell silent. High Chancellor Dren was the first to speak, his old voice careful. "My queen, surely you cannot be suggesting we honor a life debt to a human. They are our enemies. He saved my daughter," Sareth said firmly. "The life debt is real regardless of his species." "But the political implications," Keth interjected. "If word spreads that you are honoring a debt to a human, it could be seen as weakness." There are factions in the military who already question whether we should continue negotiating ceasefires. This would give them ammunition. Sareth had expected this resistance. What would you have me do? Ignore the life debt? Pretend it does not exist because it is inconvenient? That would be true weakness. A queen who abandons her honor when it becomes difficult is no queen at all. Vex spoke up. What exactly are you proposing, my queen? Sareth brought up new information on the display. Jake Morrison will be executed by his own people unless someone intervenes. I propose we extract him from human custody and bring him here, where he will be under my protection as payment of the life debt. The room erupted in protests. Dren's scales flushed with distress. That is impossible. You would be asking us to raid a human military facility. It would be an act of war. We are already at war, Sareth pointed out. You would be risking your own life, Keth added. If you were captured, the political chaos would be catastrophic. I do not intend to be captured, Sareth said coldly. I intend to succeed, Vex studied her carefully. You have already decided to do this. This meeting is not to ask our permission but to inform us of your plan. Sareth met his gaze. Yes, the life debt must be honored. This human gave my daughter her life when he had every reason to let her die. I will not abandon him to execution by his own people for showing mercy. Make the preparations, Commander. We leave in 3 days. The next 3 days were chaos. Sareth planned the mission personally, studying layouts of the human prison facility and guard rotations. She selected her best warriors for the extraction team. Vex tried multiple times to convince her to send someone else to lead the mission, but Sareth refused. This is my debt to pay, she told him. I will not send others to risk their lives for my honor. Princess Lyra, still recovering but much stronger, came to see her mother the night before the mission. You are going to get the human who saved me, aren't you? Sareth knelt down to her daughter's level. Yes, little one. He is in danger because he helped you. I must help him now. Lyra's large eyes were serious. He was kind to me, Mother. When I was scared, he spoke in a soft voice. I could not understand his words, but I knew he was trying to comfort me. Bring him back safely. I will, Sareth promised. The mission would be dangerous. Sareth knew she might not return, but as she prepared her weapons and armor that night, she felt a certainty in her heart. Jake Morrison had shown courage and compassion in the face of everything his society had taught him. He had chosen mercy over hatred. Such a person deserved better than to die in a cell, condemned by the very people he had served. Sareth would bring him home. She would honor the life debt, and perhaps in doing so she would prove that honor could exist even between enemies. The war had taught both their species to hate. Maybe it was time someone showed them a different way. Jake Morrison lay on the thin mattress in his cell, staring at the ceiling. 2 weeks had passed since his arrest, and his trial was scheduled for tomorrow morning. Amy Collins had visited him earlier in the day with the news. She looked tired and defeated. The prosecution is pushing for the death penalty, she had told him. They are saying you endangered your entire unit and violated the most basic principles of military conduct during wartime. Jake, I have to be honest with you. I don't think I can win this case, Jake had nodded slowly. He had known this was coming. The military wanted to make an example of him, to show that mercy toward the enemy would not be tolerated. In a way, he understood their logic. War required people to see the other side as less than human, or in this case, less than Zetharian. If soldiers started questioning whether the enemy deserved compassion, it would complicate everything. But Jake could not regret his choice. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those 3 small younglings. He remembered the fear in their eyes and the way the smallest one had trembled in his arms as he treated its wounds. How could saving children ever be wrong, no matter whose children they were? The lights in his cell dimmed for the night cycle. Jake pulled the thin blanket over himself and tried to sleep. Tomorrow would likely be the beginning of the end for him. He wondered if they would execute him quickly, or if he would spend years in a military prison first. Either way, his life as he knew it was over. He was just drifting off to sleep when the alarms started blaring. Jake sat up quickly as red emergency lights began flashing throughout the facility. The alarm was loud and piercing, the kind used for serious security breaches. He heard shouting in the corridors outside his cell and the sound of running boots. What was happening? Was the base under attack? The lights flickered and went out completely for a moment before emergency backup power kicked in. In the dimness, Jake could hear weapons fire echoing through the prison complex. It sounded close, getting closer with each passing second. Jake stood and moved to the force field that served as his cell door. He could see down the corridor to where two guards were taking defensive positions, their rifles aimed at something Jake could not see. One of them was shouting into his radio, calling for backup. Then the guards opened fire. Energy bolts lit up the hallway in brilliant flashes of blue. Jake heard the strange sound of Zetharian weapons returning fire, that distinctive hum and crack he had learned to recognize on the battlefield. His heart raced. Zetharians were here inside the human military base. This was not just an attack, it was an invasion. One of the guards fell, hit by enemy fire. The second guard retreated, still firing. Then Jake saw them. 4 Zetharian warriors in black combat armor moved down the corridor with fluid precision. They were larger than humans, with scales that reflected the emergency lights. Their multiple eyes scanned for threats as they advanced. Jake pressed himself against the back wall of his cell. Were they here to kill prisoners? Was this a rescue of captured Zetharians? Either way, he was trapped with nowhere to go. The Zetharian warriors cleared the corridor efficiently. 2 of them took defensive positions while the other 2 moved to the cell controls. Jake watched in confusion as they began working on the security panel. Why would they be interested in the cells? Then one of them turned and looked directly at Jake. The warrior approached his cell and did something to the control panel. The force field flickered and died. Jake stood frozen as the Zetharian entered his cell. The alien was intimidating up close, easily 7 feet tall with armor that made it look even larger. The Zetharian touched something on its wrist, and a voice came from a translation device. The words were accented and slightly mechanical, but understandable. Jake Morrison, come with us. We are here to extract you. Jake stared in disbelief. What? Why? No time for questions. We must move quickly. More weapons fire echoed from somewhere in the facility. Human reinforcements would be arriving soon. The Zetharian reached out and Jake instinctively flinched, but the warrior only placed a hand on his shoulder and guided him toward the cell door. This is crazy, Jake muttered, but he followed. What choice did he have? They moved through the corridor, the Zetharian warriors surrounding Jake in a protective formation. More human guards appeared at the end of the hallway, and the Zetharians returned fire. Jake ducked low, his heart pounding. He was in the middle of a firefight, unarmed and wearing only his prison uniform. They reached a junction where more Zetharian warriors were holding a position, and standing among them, directing their movements with hand signals, was a figure that made Jake stop in his tracks. She was clearly Zetharian, but different from the warriors. Her armor was more ornate, decorated with markings that Jake did not recognize. She was tall and moved with absolute authority. When she turned to look at him, her eyes were an unusual amber color that seemed to glow in the dim light. She approached Jake directly, and the warriors parted for her without question. This was someone important, Jake realized. Very important. The female Zetharian touched her own translation device and spoke. Her voice was strong and clear. Jake Morrison, I am Sarith Velkara, Queen of the Zetharian Empire. You saved my daughter's life. I am here to honor the life debt owed to you. Jake's mind reeled. The Queen? The actual Queen of the Zetharians was here in a human military prison to rescue him? It made no sense. I don't understand, Jake said. Your daughter? Princess Lyra. The smallest youngling you treated in the outpost. She was mine. You gave her life when you could have taken it. Now I give you life when your own people would take it from you. We must go, now. An explosion rocked the corridor. Human reinforcements were getting closer. The Queen gave orders in rapid Zetharian, and her warriors began moving toward an exit point. One of them handed Jake a piece of light armor. Put this on quickly. Jake pulled on the armor with shaking hands. It was too large for him, but better than nothing. The Queen stayed close to him as they moved, her weapon drawn and ready. They fought their way through 2 more corridors, the Zetharian warriors working with practiced efficiency to clear their path. They reached an exterior wall where the Zetharians had blown a hole through the reinforced metal. Cold night air rushed in, and Jake could see the dark sky outside. A Zetharian transport craft hovered just beyond the breach, its engines creating a low thrumming sound. Move, the Queen commanded. They ran for the transport. Human fire chased them, energy bolts scorching the ground around their feet. Jake felt something hot pass close to his head and ducked instinctively. One of the Zetharian warriors took a hit but kept moving, their armor absorbing most of the damage. They reached the transport and piled inside. The Queen was the last to board, laying down covering fire for her warriors. As soon as she was aboard, the craft lifted into the air with a powerful surge of acceleration. Jake fell into a seat, his body shaking with adrenaline. Through the open hatch, he could see the human base falling away below them. Searchlights swept the sky and ground fire chased their craft. But the transport was fast and armored. Within seconds, they were out of range and climbing into the upper atmosphere. The hatch closed with a hiss of pressurization. The Queen removed her helmet and looked at Jake with those striking amber eyes. Her scales were a deep purple color, and her features were more refined than the warriors around her. "You are safe now," she said. "You are under my protection." Jake tried to process what had just happened. "You started a war? You just attacked a human military base to get me. Why would you do that?" The Queen sat down across from him. Despite the chaos they had just escaped, she seemed calm and composed. "We are already at war, Jake Morrison. And I did not start it tonight. I simply honored a debt. In my culture, when someone saves the life of your child, you owe them everything. I could not let you die in that cell for the crime of showing mercy." "But I'm the enemy," Jake said weakly. "You were not the enemy to my daughter when she was dying in that ruined building. You were her savior. That matters more than politics or war." Jake slumped back in his seat. His mind was spinning with questions and confusion. "What happens now?" "Where are you taking me?" "To my home," the Queen said simply. "To the heart of the Empire. You will be my guest and under my protection for as long as you need it." "I can never go back," Jake realized. "To Earth, to human space. They will think I helped you. They will think I planned this somehow." The Queen's expression softened slightly. "I know this was not your choice. I took that choice from you when I came for you tonight. But the alternative was your death. I could not allow that." Jake closed his eyes. Everything he had known was gone now. His life, his career, his home. He was a traitor in the eyes of his own people. Rescued by the enemy he had been fighting for 3 years. It was too much to understand all at once. "Rest," the Queen said. "You are exhausted and we have a long journey ahead. When we reach the palace, you will have time to think and decide what you want to do. But for tonight, you are safe. That is enough." As the transport climbed higher, breaking through the atmosphere and into the black of space, Jake leaned his head back and tried to accept his new reality. He had saved 3 alien children and lost everything. Now an alien queen had saved him and taken him away from everything he had. Jake woke up in a room that was nothing like his prison cell. The bed beneath him was soft and comfortable, far better than anything he had slept on in years. The walls were a pale blue color with patterns that seemed to shift when he looked at them directly. Sunlight or something like it filtered through tall windows that showed an alien sky. For a moment, Jake thought he might be dreaming. Then the memories came rushing back. The rescue. The firefight. Queen Sareth explaining that she had come for him because he saved her daughter. He sat up quickly, his heart racing, and looked around the room. It was large and well furnished. There was a sitting area with comfortable chairs, a desk, and a doorway that led to what looked like a bathroom. His prison clothes were gone, replaced by simple but clean garments made from some soft material he did not recognize. They had changed his clothes while he slept, which was unsettling, but at least they were clean. A soft chime sounded and a voice spoke in Zetharian through a speaker. Jake could not understand the words. A moment later, the voice repeated in English through a translation system. "Jake Morrison, you are awake. The Queen requests your presence when you are ready. Please use the facilities and dress. Someone will come for you." Jake found the bathroom through the doorway. It was strange but functional. The water was a bit warmer than he preferred and the soap had an unfamiliar scent, but he managed to clean himself properly for the first time in weeks. In the mirror, he looked at his own face and barely recognized himself. He had lost weight in prison, and there were dark circles under his eyes. New clothes were laid out in the bedroom when he returned. They were clearly Zetharian in design but sized for a human. Jake dressed slowly, his mind still trying to process where he was and what had happened. He was in the heart of the Zetharian Empire, surrounded by the enemy, or were they the enemy anymore? He did not know what to think. The door opened and a Zetharian female entered. She was smaller than the warriors he had seen, wearing simple robes instead of armor. She bowed her head slightly and spoke through a translation device attached to her wrist. "I am Kira. I will take you to the Queen. Please follow me." Jake followed her through corridors that were both beautiful and alien. The architecture was different from human buildings, with flowing curves instead of sharp angles. Other Zitharians passed them in the hallways, and many stopped to stare at Jake. Some looked curious. Others looked hostile. Jake kept his head down and stayed close to Kira. They entered a large room that seemed to be some kind of sitting room or office. Queen Sareth stood near the windows looking out at the city beyond. She turned when they entered, and Jake was struck again by her presence. She wore elegant robes instead of armor now, and her scales caught the light in shades of deep purple and silver. "Thank you, Kira," the queen said. The servant bowed and left, closing the door behind her. Jake stood awkwardly, not sure what he was supposed to do. Should he bow, salute? He settled for standing at attention like he would with a human superior officer. Sareth smiled slightly. "You do not need to be so formal, Jake Morrison. You are not my prisoner. You are my guest and under my protection. Please sit." She gestured to the chairs near the windows. Jake sat carefully, and Sareth took the chair across from him. This close, he could see the intelligence in her amber eyes and the way she studied him with clear interest. "I imagine you have many questions," she said. "Where am I?" Jake asked. "What planet?" "We are on Zith Prime, the capital world of our empire. This is the royal palace. You are in the guest quarters of my personal household." Jake absorbed this information. He was at the very center of enemy territory in the Queen's own home. "Why am I here? I mean, I understand the life debt thing, but what does that mean exactly?" Sareth leaned back in her chair. "In Zitharian culture, a life debt is sacred. When someone saves your life or the life of someone you love, you owe them a debt that must be repaid. The debt is binding until the one who is owed releases you from it, or until you have saved their life in return. So you saved my life, and now we are even," Jake asked. "It is not quite so simple," Sareth said. "You saved my daughter when you had no reason to help her. You sacrificed your career and your freedom. Simply rescuing you from prison does not balance that debt. You are owed more." Jake shook his head. "I don't want anything. I just did what I thought was right." "I know," Sareth said softly. "That is what makes your action so remarkable. You expected no reward. You knew you would be punished. Yet you helped her anyway." She paused. "May I ask you something? Why did you do it? What made you choose 3 Zitharian younglings over your own future?" Jake thought about the question. He had asked himself the same thing many times in his cell. They were children. They were hurt and scared. How could I just leave them to die? I became a medic because I wanted to help people, to save lives. It didn't matter that they were Zitharian. In that moment, they were just kids who needed help. Sareth watched him with an expression Jake could not quite read. "Your people do not think the way you do. Most humans see us as monsters, as creatures without value, just as most of my people see humans the same way. This war has taught both sides to hate." "I know," Jake said. "I was taught to hate too. But when I saw those younglings, I couldn't. They were too small, too helpless. Hate seems stupid when you are looking at a scared child." There was a sound at the door, and it opened before Sareth could respond. A small Zitharian youngling rushed into the room, followed by a flustered-looking servant. "Princess Lyra, please, you must not disturb the queen." But the youngling ignored the servant and ran directly to Jake. She was small, coming up only to his knee, with bright green scales and large eyes that Jake recognized immediately. This was the smallest youngling he had saved, the one who had been most severely injured. Princess Lyra looked up at Jake and made clicking sounds that the translation device interpreted. "You are the kind human. You helped me when I was hurt." Jake knelt down to her level, unsure of what to say. "Hi, I'm glad you are okay." Lyra reached out and touched his hand with her small clawed fingers. "You were gentle. I was so scared, but you made the pain stop. Mother says you are a hero." Jake glanced at Sareth, who was watching the interaction with a soft expression he had not seen before. The fierce warrior queen from the rescue mission was gone, replaced by a mother watching her child. "I am just glad I could help," Jake said to Lyra. The youngling smiled, showing small teeth. "Will you stay with us?" "I want to learn about humans." "Mother says you can teach me, Lyra," Sareth said gently. "Jake Morrison has just arrived. Give him time to rest and adjust. You will have time to talk later." Lyra looked disappointed but nodded. "Okay, Mother." She looked back at Jake. "But you will stay, right? You won't leave?" Jake did not know how to answer that. Where would he go? He could not return to human space. "I will be here for a while," he said finally. Satisfied, Lyra allowed the servant to lead her away. When they were alone again, Sarith spoke. I apologize for the interruption. Lyra has been excited to meet you since she learned you were coming. She talks about you constantly. She seems like a good kid, Jake said. How old is she? 4 cycles, which is about 4 of your years. She is young but very intelligent. She wants to learn everything. Sarith paused. She asks about you every day. About why you helped her, about human culture, about everything. You made an impression on her. Jake felt a strange weight in his chest. I am glad she is okay. That is all I wanted. Over the next few weeks, Jake began to adjust to his new life. He was given freedom to move around the palace, though guards always accompanied him. The other Zetharians treated him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Some were openly hostile, clearly unhappy that a human was living in the royal palace. Others seemed intrigued. Kira became something like a guide for him, teaching him about Zetharian customs and helping him navigate the complex social rules of palace life. She was patient with his questions and never made him feel stupid for not understanding things. Jake spent time learning the Zetharian language through immersion programs. The sounds were difficult for his human throat to make, but he practiced every day. He studied their history and culture, trying to understand the people he had been fighting for 3 years. Princess Lyra visited him almost daily. She would sit with him and ask endless questions about Earth, about humans, about everything. Jake found himself enjoying their time together. She was bright and funny, and her enthusiasm was contagious. Sarith also spent time with him more than Jake expected. Sometimes she would invite him to walk in the palace gardens, where they could talk privately. She asked him about his life before the war, about his family, about what he believed in. Jake found himself opening up to her in ways he had not expected. Why do you spend so much time with me? Jake asked during one of their walks. You are the queen. You must have important things to do. Sarith was quiet for a moment, watching the alien plant sway in the breeze. You interest me, Jake Morrison. You represent something I have not seen in this war. Compassion without expectation of reward. Courage to do what is right even at great personal cost. These are qualities I value, and they are rare in anyone, human or Zetharian. I am not special, Jake said. I just did what anyone should do. The news of Jake Morrison's rescue spread across human space like wildfire. Within days, every news outlet was covering the story. A human soldier, accused of treason for helping enemy younglings, had been extracted from a military prison by Zetharian forces led by their queen herself. The political implications were enormous. Admiral Scott Hayes stood before the Earth Defense Council, his face grim. This is an outrage. The Zetharians violated our sovereignty and attacked a military installation. Morrison is a traitor who betrayed his unit and endangered human lives. The fact that their queen personally came to retrieve him suggests he was working with them all along. The council chamber erupted in arguments. Some members agreed with Hayes, calling for an immediate military response. Others pointed out that the Zetharians had not actually killed anyone during the raid. They had used non-lethal force when possible and seemed focused entirely on retrieving Morrison. Perhaps we should ask why their queen thought it necessary to risk her life. For one human soldier, said Counselor Ben Turner, what does that say about our assumptions regarding the enemy? It says they are manipulative, Hayes snapped. Morrison is probably being used for propaganda purposes. We should be focusing on how to respond to this attack, not debating the motives of alien invaders. But the public response was more complex than Hayes wanted to admit. Peace activist groups led by a woman named Linda Brennan seized on the story. They pointed out that Morrison had been imprisoned for showing mercy, for saving children. They argued that if the enemy queen herself valued such compassion enough to risk everything, maybe both sides needed to reconsider this war. Protests erupted on multiple human worlds. Some protesters carried signs demanding Morrison's execution if he ever returned. Others carried signs calling him a hero and demanding peace talks. The human population was deeply divided. On the other side of the war, the Zetharian Empire faced its own political crisis. Queen Sarith's decision to personally rescue a human had shocked her entire government. Many saw it as dangerous weakness that would embolden the enemy. Warlord Thex Morgath was the most vocal opponent. He was a powerful military leader who commanded significant forces and had ambitions for the throne. He saw Sarith's actions as an opportunity to undermine her authority. The queen has lost her mind, Thex declared before the Grand Council. "She risks her life and the lives of our best warriors for a human. She brings this creature into our most secure facility and treats him as an honored guest. What message does this send to our enemies? That we are soft? That we value their lives over our own people?" Commander Vex, loyal to the Queen, stood to respond. The Queen honored a sacred life debt. This human saved Princess Lyra and 2 other younglings when he could have killed them. To ignore such a debt would be the true weakness. It would say we abandon our principles when they become inconvenient. Life debts are for our own people, Thex countered. Not for humans. They are animals who understand nothing of honor or tradition. Morrison probably saved those younglings as part of some human trick, knowing it would create exactly this situation. The debate raged for hours. Some supported the Queen, arguing that honor must be maintained regardless of species. Others sided with Thex, claiming that bringing a human to the capital was a security risk and a sign of poor judgment. High Chancellor Dren tried to maintain order, but the divisions were deep. The military was particularly split. Some officers admired Sareth's courage and commitment to tradition. Others felt she had gone too far and put sentiment above strategic thinking. Meanwhile, Jake remained in the palace, largely unaware of the political storm his presence had created. He spent his days learning Zetharian language and culture, walking in the gardens and spending time with Princess Lyra. Sareth kept him informed of basic developments, but shielded him from the worst of the controversy. "There are some who are not happy about your presence here," she told him during one of their private conversations. "You should be aware of this for your own safety." "I kind of figured," Jake said. "I get hostile looks from a lot of the palace staff, and I hear the guards talking even when they think I cannot understand them yet." Sareth's expression was troubled. "I will not let anyone harm you. But the political situation is becoming complicated. There are factions within the military who see you as a weakness they can exploit against me. Maybe I should leave," Jake suggested. "I do not want to cause problems for you." "And go where?" Sareth asked. "You cannot return to human space. They would execute you, and I will not abandon you to an uncertain fate after bringing you here. No, Jake Morrison. You are under my protection, and that protection is absolute." A week later, Sareth made a decision that shocked everyone. She called a gathering of the Grand Council and made a formal declaration that was broadcast throughout the Empire. "I stand before you today to address the matter of Jake Morrison," she began, her voice carrying authority that silenced all whispers. "Some have questioned my judgment in honoring the life debt owed to this human. Some have called it weakness. I tell you now that honoring our debts and maintaining our principles is the truest form of strength." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Jake Morrison saved my daughter and 2 other younglings when he had every reason to let them die. He sacrificed his career, his freedom, and his life among his own people to show mercy to our young. Such courage and compassion deserves recognition, not scorn." The chamber remained silent, everyone waiting for what would come next. "Therefore, I am formally bringing Jake Morrison into my household as a personal advisor on human affairs. He will serve under my direct protection and authority. Any harm that comes to him will be considered an attack on me personally." The declaration was explosive. In Zetharian noble tradition, bringing someone into your household was a profound statement. It meant you were claiming them as part of your family structure, under your direct protection and patronage. For a queen to extend this to anyone was significant. To extend it to a human was unprecedented. Thex Morgath rose from his seat, his scales flushed with anger. "This is unacceptable. You would elevate a human to a position of trust in your own household? You would give him access to our secrets, our strategies? I would honor a debt and recognize value where I find it," Sareth replied coldly. "Jake Morrison has more honor in one finger than many in this chamber have in their entire bodies. He will advise me on human culture and thinking, which may prove valuable as this war continues. Unless you prefer to remain ignorant of our enemy's mindset." "He is the enemy," Thex shouted. "He was the enemy," Sareth corrected. "Now he is under my protection. That is my decision as your queen. Those who have a problem with it are welcome to challenge my authority formally." It was a direct threat. Challenging a Zetharian queen's authority formally meant combat to the death, or accepting her judgment. No one in the chamber was quite ready to take that step, not yet. But Jake could see the anger on many faces. This was far from over. When news of Sareth's declaration reached human space, it created even more chaos. Linda Brennan and her peace movement celebrated it as a sign that reconciliation might be possible. If the enemy queen was willing to extend such protection and honor to a human, maybe there was hope for peace. Admiral Hayes and his supporters saw it differently. They claimed Sareth was using Morrison for propaganda, that his presence in her household was proof he had been collaborating with the enemy all along. They demanded increased military action against the Zitharians. The news media could not get enough of the story. Every day brought new analysis, new opinions, new protests on both sides. Jake Morrison became the most famous and controversial human alive, and he was not even in human territory anymore. Back on Zyth Prime, Jake was called to Sareth's private chambers. She looked tired, the weight of leadership evident in the set of her shoulders. "I want to apologize," she said. "I have made your situation more difficult with my declaration. The political situation is worse than I expected." "You do not need to apologize," Jake said. "You have done nothing but protect me since you brought me here. If there are political problems because of that, it is not your fault." "But it is," Sareth said. "I knew this would be controversial. I chose to honor the life debt anyway, and I chose to bring you into my household. These were my decisions, and you are bearing the consequences." Jake moved closer to her. Over the past weeks, they had spent considerable time together, and he had come to respect and admire this alien queen who valued honor above political convenience. "You did the right thing, just like I did the right thing when I saved Lyra. Sometimes doing the right thing causes problems, but that does not make it wrong." Sareth looked at him with those amber eyes, and something passed between them. A connection that went beyond life debts and political maneuvering. "You are remarkable, Jake Morrison. I have never met anyone quite like you, human or Zitharian. I am just trying to survive and figure out where I fit in this new life," Jake said honestly. "You fit here," Sareth said firmly. "In my household, under my protection. Whatever comes next, we will face it together." Outside the palace walls, the political firestorm continued to rage. Both civilizations were dividing over what Jake Morrison represented. The attack came in the middle of the night. Jake was asleep in his quarters when alarms began blaring throughout the palace. He jerked awake, heart pounding as the sound of weapons fire echoed through the halls. For a moment he thought he was back in the war, back on the battlefield. Then his door burst open. Commander Vex stood there in full combat armor, his weapon drawn. "Jake Morrison, come with me now. The palace is under attack. We must get you to safety." Jake scrambled out of bed, pulling on clothes as quickly as he could. "What is happening? Who is attacking?" "Warlord Thex has made his move," Vex said grimly. "He is staging a coup. His forces are trying to take the palace and remove the queen from power. We must go now." They ran through corridors filled with smoke and the sounds of battle. Other guards joined them, forming a protective circle around Jake. They could hear fighting nearby, the clash of Zitharian weapons and the shouts of warriors in combat. They reached a secured corridor, where more guards were holding a defensive position. Beyond them, Jake could see the royal chambers where Sareth and Lyra would be. "I need to get to the queen," Jake said. "That is where we are going," Vex replied. "She has ordered you brought to her immediately." They fought their way through, Jake staying low as energy bolts flew overhead. He saw Zitharian warriors fighting each other, loyalists against Thex's rebels. The palace was tearing itself apart from within. They finally reached the royal chambers. Sareth stood in the center of the room wearing her battle armor and holding her weapon with practiced ease. Princess Lyra was behind her, protected by a circle of guards. When Sareth saw Jake, relief flashed across her face. "You are unharmed," she said. "I am fine," Jake replied. "What is happening?" "Thex has decided to take the throne by force. He has significant military support from those who opposed my decision to honor your life debt. They see me as weak and they want a leader who will prosecute the war more aggressively." An explosion rocked the building. Thex's forces were getting closer. Sareth made a decision quickly. "Vex, get Lyra to the emergency transport. Make sure she gets off-world to safety." "Mother, no!" Lyra cried out. "I will not leave you." Sareth knelt down and held her daughter's face gently. "You must go, little one. You are the heir. If something happens to me, our people need you. Vex will protect you." Lyra looked at Jake with tears in her large eyes. "Will you protect my mother?" Jake did not hesitate. "Yes, I promise." Vex and several guards led Lyra away through a hidden passage. Sareth stood and looked at Jake seriously. You should go with them. This is not your fight. Yes, it is, Jake said. Thex is attacking because of me, because you protected me. I am not running away while you fight my battle. You have no weapon, no armor that fits properly. You cannot even speak our language well enough to coordinate in battle. Then give me a weapon and point me at the enemy, Jake said firmly. I was a soldier, remember? I know how to fight. Sareth studied him for a long moment, then handed him one of the spare weapons from the armory nearby. You are either very brave or very foolish. Probably both, Jake admitted, checking the weapon. It was heavier than human rifles, but manageable. Just tell me which ones are the good guys. Despite the situation, Sareth smiled slightly. Stay close to me. Follow my lead. And Jake Morrison, do not get yourself killed. I did not rescue you from a human prison just to lose you in my own palace. The next hours were chaos. Thex's forces pushed deeper into the palace, trying to reach the throne room where Sareth had made her stand. The fighting was brutal in close quarters. Jake stayed near Sareth, using his combat training to support her guards. He saved Commander Vex's life when a rebel warrior caught him from behind. He helped coordinate a defensive position using tactics from his military training. The Zetharians were surprised to find that this human could fight effectively, that he was willing to stand and defend their queen against their own people. The battle reached its peak when Thex himself entered the throne room with his elite warriors. The warlord was massive, covered in battle scars and wearing armor decorated with trophies from countless victories. He looked at Sareth with contempt. You have weakened yourself for a human, Thex growled. You are not fit to lead us anymore. Surrender the throne and I will spare your life. I will never surrender to a traitor who attacks his own queen, Sareth replied coldly. You want the throne? Then face me in single combat as tradition demands. Thex laughed. Tradition? You speak of tradition after breaking every custom by bringing this human into your household? Very well. I will kill you according to tradition, and then I will kill your pet human as my first act as the new ruler. The throne room cleared as the two leaders prepared to fight. This was an ancient custom among Zetharians. Challenges to royal authority were settled through personal combat. The winner took the throne. The loser died. Jake watched with growing fear as Sareth and Thex circled each other. Thex was larger and had more combat experience, but Sareth was faster and fought with focused determination. They clashed in a violent exchange of blows, their weapons creating sparks as they struck. The fight was brutal and seemed to last forever. Both warriors landed hits. Sareth took a cut across her arm that bled purple blood. Thex received a slash across his chest that slowed him slightly. They were evenly matched and both were tiring. Then Thex made a mistake. He overextended on an attack, leaving himself open for just a moment. Sareth took advantage immediately, her blade finding the weak point in his armor. Thex fell to his knees, mortally wounded. You fought with honor, Sareth said quietly, breathing hard from the exertion. Die with honor as well. Thex nodded slowly, accepting his fate. Perhaps I was wrong about you. Perhaps you are stronger than I believed. He looked at Jake. The human fights for you. That is something I did not expect. Those were his last words. Thex fell forward and moved no more. With their leader dead, the rebel forces surrendered. The coup had failed, but the cost was high. Many loyal warriors had died defending the queen. The palace was damaged and would need extensive repairs. And the political divisions that had caused this violence still existed. In the aftermath, Jake helped treat the wounded, using his medical training to save lives on both sides. The Zetharian doctors were surprised by his skill and knowledge. Some of the rebels who had wanted him dead hours before now owed their lives to his care. Sareth watched him work with an expression of wonder. Later, when the immediate crisis had passed, she found him sitting alone in one of the gardens. The early morning light was painting the sky in strange colors. You saved my life today, she said, sitting beside him. When that warrior came at me from the side, you shot him before he could strike. That was the third time you saved someone I love. I told Lyra I would protect you, Jake said. I keep my promises. Sareth reached out and took his hand, a gesture that was significant in Zetharian culture. You are no longer just someone to whom I owe a debt, Jake Morrison. You have become important to me in your own right. You fight for us. You heal us. You bridge the gap between our peoples with your very existence. Jake looked at their joined hands, human and Zetharian. What happens now? Thex is dead, but the problems that caused his rebellion are still there. Half your people think you are weak for protecting me. Half my people think I am a traitor. Then perhaps it is time to show both our peoples a different way, Sareth said thoughtfully. The coup has failed, but it revealed how divided we have become. And according to my intelligence, the same divisions exist in human space. The war is tearing both our civilizations apart from within. What are you thinking? Jake asked. I am thinking about peace, Sareth said. Not immediate peace. That may be impossible, but perhaps we can start talking. Perhaps we can show both sides that cooperation is possible. She looked at him seriously. Would you be willing to be a bridge between our peoples? To help facilitate communication? Jake thought about everything that had happened. He had saved 3 alien children and lost everything. Then an alien queen had saved him and given him a new purpose. He had lived among the enemy and found them to be people, not monsters. He had fought beside them and bled with them. Yes, he said finally, I will help however I can. Over the next months, Sareth began the slow process of reaching out to human leadership through secret diplomatic channels. It was dangerous and controversial. Admiral Hayes was initially hostile to any suggestion of talks. But Linda Brennan and the peace movement had grown powerful in human space. Public opinion was divided, and many were tired of a war that seemed to have no end. Jake became the intermediary, the one person who could speak to both sides with authority. He understood human military thinking and he understood Zetharian culture and honor. More importantly, both sides knew his story. He was the human who saved alien children at the cost of everything. And he was the protected member of the alien queen's household. The first meeting took place on a neutral space station. Jake stood between human diplomats and Zetharian representatives, literally and figuratively bridging the gap. Admiral Hayes was there, looking at Jake with barely concealed anger. You are a traitor to your species, Morrison. I am someone who chose mercy over hatred, Jake replied calmly. And I am someone who has lived with both humans and Zetharians. I know we